A sad story of animals saving a man. Igor was a middle-aged man, quiet and calm, living in a small village surrounded by dense forests and fields. He was lonely, having no close people, except for his loyal companions, Max and Bella. These two dogs became his family. With Max, a large German shepherd, he could walk through the forest for hours, and with Bella, a playful and kind-hearted Labrador, Igor often spent quiet evenings by the campfire, when the world seemed perfect, far from the noise and hustle. Max was always there when Igor needed to make a decision, as a faithful guardian. He would approach whenever Igor felt stressed and lay beside him to offer support. Bella, on the other hand, was the light in his life that prevented him from sinking into despair. All the days spent with them were filled with quiet and harmony. Igor was alone. He rarely interacted with people, preferring solitude and peace. From time to time, he visited the nearest town for work, and in the evening, he would return to his cozy home, where Max and Bella would greet him. Igor was convinced that only thanks to these animals was his life complete. But life wasn't always easy. Igor sometimes felt that he wasn't capable of making his life better because he had no bright goals. His days dragged on day by day and weeks passed by. Then one evening, when Igor was returning home from work, something happened that changed everything. The road was wet and slippery, and the rain fell relentlessly. Igor was tired after a long workday, and his attention faltered. On a sharp curve, his car skidded, and before he could react, it veered off the road. After several rolls, the car came to a stop upside down at the bottom of a ravine. Igor lost consciousness, and his body was in critical condition. He was badly injured, and his breathing was barely audible. It seemed like all was lost, but this time he had other plans. Early stages of rescue. The animals as the first heroes. The dogs sensed something was wrong the moment Igor got into the accident. Bella began running around the house, barking desperately, trying to get attention. Max, noticing Bella's distress, also went outside, and sensing that something was wrong, ran towards the road, barking loudly. Bella, small and energetic, was always the first to sense danger, and her instincts didn't fail her. That night, they searched for him for almost an hour. In the darkness, they continued to run without stopping. Max, noticing Igor's tracks, ran in that direction, and Bella followed him with no less determination. When they found the car, it was just the beginning of their struggle. Igor was unconscious, and they didn't know how to help him. Max tried to open the car door, biting it and trying to move it. Bella stood by, her paws trembling, her eyes filled with worry. Soon they began barking, calling for help. A neighbor, hearing them, rushed to help, called an ambulance, and was shocked by what had happened. The dogs didn't leave Igor. They sat by him, listening intently for any sound, waiting for help to arrive. They didn't understand what was happening, but they intuitively felt that they had to be there. The turning point. Defying time. When Igor was brought to the hospital, his condition remained critical. The doctors said he had almost no chance of surviving. Broken bones, internal injuries, blood loss, all of this made his condition critical. The prognosis was hopeless. But the loyalty of Max and Bella knew no bounds. The dogs didn't leave the hospital. They sat at the door to the intensive care unit, waiting, as if they believed that Igor would wake up. Even when doctors said there was no hope, Max and Bella never left their owner. Their loyalty was unshakable. Days passed. Igor didn't regain consciousness, and his condition only worsened. But one morning, when the rain finally stopped, Igor suddenly moved. His hand twitched slightly. Max immediately ran to the door, began barking, and Bella, full of joy, jumped up and licked his face. Igor opened his eyes. It was incredible. He couldn't believe that this was happening to him. Weak, injured, but alive, he felt that his dogs were there, and it gave him strength. He realized that he had to fight, that they needed him just as much as he needed them. Hope and struggle, the miracle of survival. Igor was in a coma for several weeks, but when he woke up, everything changed. The doctors were amazed that he had survived. They didn't believe that a person with such injuries could come back to life. However, the power of animal love knew no bounds. Max and Bella were by Igor's side every day. They sat by his bed looking into his eyes, as if inviting him to come back to life. Despite the pain, Igor tried to fight. He knew that with his animals, he would find it easier to survive. The doctors recommended he rest a lot, but Igor felt his strength returning with each passing day. Max and Bella helped him at every step. Weeks passed, and Igor began to stand. These were the first steps, which were difficult for him, but the dogs supported him. He could feel how they were waiting for him to gather strength and resolve. Their love and devotion gave him more strength than any medicine. A new stage, life after the trauma. The process of Igor's recovery was long and painful, but with each step, each day, he felt his body and spirit recovering. Igor was no longer the person who lived in isolation. He began to realize that his life had changed. He couldn't just go back to his old life, but he could create something important. Igor decided to open an animal shelter. He had experienced pain and suffering himself, and now he wanted to help those who had found themselves in a similar situation. Igor was sure that every animal deserved a chance at a new life. He began collecting funds to start the shelter and surrounded himself with animals again. Max and Bella were with him in this new venture. They were his new family. Igor began working with homeless animals, helping them recover just as he had once recovered. He opened a shelter where dogs and cats found warmth and care. Every day, the shelter became more popular, and more people came to take one of the rescued animals into their homes. Igor felt that his life was gaining new meaning. Sometimes he would sit on the porch of his house, watching the rescued animals, and feel his heart fill with gratitude for surviving and creating this place. Trials and new goals. With each passing year, the shelter for animals continued to grow, and Igor couldn't stop being amazed at how much love and care there was in the people willing to participate in this important cause. He encountered new difficulties time and again, but each time he overcame them with the same determination that had been within him since the accident. Max and Bella became not only loyal helpers, but symbols of the hope that Igor could now offer to those in need. When he first opened the shelter, his dream was simply to provide animals with shelter and food. But over time, he realized that he needed to do much more. He decided not only to save animals, but also to find ways to change society's perception of them. First and foremost, he wanted to help people understand that animals were not just pets, but full-fledged members of society deserving of respect and love. One of the biggest steps Igor took was launching a program that allowed people not only to adopt dogs and cats, but also to participate in their rehabilitation, volunteer, and help animals with psychological and emotional trauma. Igor started organizing training for future pet owners so they could better understand how to interact with animals and how important it was to give them space for recovery. Igor decided to open a center for both people and animals, where they could learn not only the basics of pet care, but also how to interact with them correctly. A new trend emerged. People began seeing animals as equals. Igor actively worked on this, aiming not only to educate, but also to inspire people to help not just pets, but to save themselves in the process. New friends and new difficulties. Not everything was so smooth. Despite the successes, Igor continued to face difficult situations. He realized that a significant part of the work was helping animals in long-term rehabilitation. Unfortunately, not everyone was ready for this. At one point, he encountered a real threat to his shelter. The local authorities offered him to vacate the premises as they planned to build a new residential complex on that land. This was a real blow for Igor. He didn't know what to do, but knew that he couldn't afford to lose everything he had built. Together with Olga, who had become not only his friend but his right hand, they started working with lawyers and volunteers to defend the shelter's rights. It was a difficult time, full of anxiety, fear, and the search for solutions. The entire shelter team united, and thanks to the support of many people, Igor was able to defend his territory and continue developing the shelter. A year later, a path to new heights. A year later, Igor's animal shelter had grown much larger. It was a place where animals were not just saved, but rehabilitated, where people and animals became one. Igor and his team, including Max, Bella, and Olga, began building new enclosures, improving conditions, and expanding the territory. With volunteers, Igor established several new programs for animals who not only needed physical recovery but also required emotional rehabilitation. He continued to face challenges, but now he knew everything would be fine because he was no longer alone. Igor discovered a new world, one full of care, love, and meaning. His life was filled with joy and purpose. He was making the world better, even though he knew there was still much work ahead. But he was sure of one thing: the love and loyalty he had experienced from his dogs were the main reasons for his strength and success. And it was thanks to these animals that he discovered a new path, one filled with care, love, and loyalty. Conclusion: a story of love and gratitude. Now every day Igor woke up with gratitude. He knew his life mattered, that every day spent with Max, Bella, Olga, and all the rescued animals was a gift. He was happy that he had been able to create not only a shelter, but also an atmosphere of love and respect for all living beings. The story of Igor, Max, and Bella is not just about saving animals, but about the power of love and loyalty that can change the world. It's a story of how meeting loyal friends can turn your life around, give it new meaning, and fill it with deep joy. Igor and his dog's story will live in the hearts of those who believe in miracles, in the power of love, and in the possibility of changing the world for the better.